Hey guys, my name is Eliza. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're gonna embark on one of my bigger projects. We are really and truly starting from scratch. I have done nothing on this yet. I haven't drawn the design, I haven't bought the fabric. All I did is gathered some inspiration, which I'm going to show to you now. Some of you might know the brand The Vampire's Wife. It was founded by Susie Cave and she's the wife of the famous musician Nick Cave. Today we are going to start working on a dress that is heavily inspired by the iconic The Vampire's Wife silhouette, which is basically a etui kind of dress with wide shoulders. Most of those dresses I believe have shoulder pads and a very distinctive bust dart that basically gives the dress a very beautiful feminine but very strong silhouette. I am amazed by the designs because they're so simple yet so striking. The thing that defines these dresses are often the fabrics that are used for them. They come in different lengths and in different colors and in different fabrics, but often they would be made in some sort of glittering polyester. One of the most famous iterations of that would be Kate, Princess of Wales, Kate Middleton, wearing this for her first ever portrait as the future queen. But also other famous people have worn the dresses, for example, Sienna Miller, Kate Blanchett, Dakota Johnson, you name them. I always wanted to make a dress in that kind of design, and here we are today. As I said, I have not even bought the fabric yet, so we are really at the conceptualization stage of this dress. In this video, I'm going to show you how I draw out the design, how I choose the fabric, and how I draft the pattern. Let me show you a few examples of iterations of the Vampire's Wife dresses that I really like. So I pinned a few on my Pinterest board. So specifically, I love the shorter ones. I think the shorter ones are super sassy and party dresses, but you can still dress them down and wear them for daily occasions if it's not a nylon glitter version of the dress. So that's something I'm considering recreating. And then also something I had the idea for and I was really happy to see actually exists is to make the dress in a needle cord. So this is a version that Kate Blanchett wore, which is really more of a day dress version of the Vampire's Wife design, and I really like that. So I think what I'm going to do today is I'm gonna go out to the fabric shops and do a bit of searching, and I'm gonna see if I can find a needle cord that has the right quality and that has a color that I like, because I have no idea yet what color I'm gonna go for. So let's go shopping. Alright, it's a new day and I haven't actually shown you yet exactly what I bought for this project, and I think it's time. You've probably already seen the color of this. I bought a gorgeous needle cord in this jewel tone berry color that I am obsessed with. I am so surprised I found this because most shops only had very basic colors like green, blue, the occasional pink, but none of them had these in between interesting tones. I decided to go for this because it's supposed to be a dress that the Vampire's Wife would wear. So this beautiful berry tone seems just right to me. It has something moody about it, but still sexy and mysterious. So this is what I'm going to go for. And I bought 3 meters of this, which is very likely too much, but I just wanted to be on the safe side. It wasn't very expensive, so went for a little bit more on that. Also, I made the executive decision to line the dress, which I don't think is necessary, but I just feel like lining dresses, lining any project really, just gives it this extra luxurious feel and is going to make it more durable and more long lasting for the future. Also, needle cord is something that is hard to clean, and if you have a barrier between your body and the actual shell fabric, that is going to help it stay cleaner for longer, if that makes sense. So we don't have to put it to the dry cleaners or anything like that. I found this beautiful purple viscose lining material, which is supposedly breathable, and it is a pretty good match with my shell fabric. And then also I found a no-name thread that is actually the perfect color for this fabric. The Gutermann that I found first was a bit too dark, so I went for this one instead. And I also got a zipper in the matching color. And lastly, I think this dress is going to live from its magnificent shoulders, so I got some shoulder pads as well. Never made anything with shoulder pads in it. I remember doing this once in fashion school. So they also have a hook and loop, so it's detachable, but they're going to be sewn into the dress. So all of the necessary materials done. The next thing I'm going to do is to draft the pattern, which in my mind is fairly simple. I'm still contemplating creating a mock-up though, but we will see if that happens later. Not made the decision yet, so let's make the pattern. All right, so what's that dress going to look like? I like to use my iPad to draw out things. I recently tried doing it by hand, which I used to do in the past, but I kind of am out of shape, so I'm going to show you what it's going to look like here. So I have my mannequin drawn out here, and I'm going to start with the top. So basically we just have a simple crew neck, and we have straight shoulders that will hold our shoulder pads, which is quite exciting. We then have a very, very simple and straight bodice, but the interesting thing about the bodice is that the darts, the bust darts, are going to be at a very, very dramatic angle like this, something like that. We have obviously a very normal shoulder seam, and we're going to have a waist seam as well. Now the skirt is going to be very, very simple. It's a simple mini skirt. For me, it's probably going to be about 50-55 centimeters long, but the nice thing about it is going to be that it's going to have ruffles. Not entirely sure yet if I'm going to do one row of ruffles or two. I'll see about that when I get to it. And now the interesting thing about this Vampire's Wife silhouette is that it has these amazing sleeves which stand up quite a bit in the shoulder area, but then they get very narrow. They stop around the elbow area. And then also here we are going to have these ruffles. And the cool thing about this Vampire's Wife silhouette is it's modern, yet it has a very, very subtle hint to like 1790s Baroque Rococo, I guess, dresses that had similar sleeves like this with these little curtains around the cuffs, which I think is quite cute. And that's really it. That's basically the silhouette of the dress I'm going to make. Very, very classic Vampire's Wife. Simplicity is key, yet it's super feminine, which I really like. Okay, so this is the design for the dress. Again, like I said, extremely simple, but I think so feminine and striking, and I really, really enjoy the sleeves and these interesting darts. And I think the fabric is really what makes it come to life. And also I think it's a design that can be worn for many different occasions. You can wear it to the office, most likely. You can wear it to a night out, to a dinner, to a brunch, to a birthday, whatever, you know. It's an everyday perfect dress. You're never overdressed, you're never underdressed. It's just cute. Like, can we agree on this? It's just cute. Let us talk about the pattern for this dress, which is intermediate, I would say. I wouldn't call it difficult, but it's definitely also not necessarily a beginner pattern. But if you go ahead and create a bodice block from the tutorial that I've linked in my description box, you can get a head start and start working on the pattern for this dress. So I have bodice blocks printed here to a smaller scale for demonstration purposes. The reason why we need this bodice block is because we are going to use it to trace the elements that we need to reuse for this pattern. However, we are going to modify the front of the bodice block to fit our design. For that, I'm going to make incisions down the shoulder dart as well as around the waist dart. So we know that this pattern has one single bust dart, which makes one on each side once the pattern is cut. For that, we need to manipulate this front bodice so that the shoulder dart and the waist dart are gone and we just have one big bust dart. For that, we're simply grabbing a straight ruler and we are going to make a mark on our side seam that is 3 centimeters from the waistline. So 3 centimeters up from the waistline. Now we are going to go ahead and connect this marking with the end of our bust dart. Now we're going to make an incision, but make sure you don't cut this piece loose. And now you can pivot the armhole piece as well as the waist piece, which then leaves us with something looking like this. You can go ahead and cut the shoulder back to have one straight line. I'm going to grab a piece of paper. You can use a craft paper roll, or baking sheets also work quite well. And I'm going to go ahead and create a straight line that I can use as my center back and center front. Now I'm going to place the center front of my bodice along that line, and I'm going to start to trace my bodice. I'm going to make a marking at the end of my shoulder. Then I'm going to go down to my waist. Something that you will want to do is to make sure you are expanding the armhole a little bit. So from the end of your armhole, you can measure down by about 2 centimeters to create a new armhole. Now I'm connecting all of these dots with each other. And this is our front bodice piece. I like to label all of my pieces well, labeling the center front, and this is what we need for the front piece. Now the back piece eventually is exactly the same as the basic bodice block, so we don't necessarily have to trace it. I will, just to make everything complete. Alright, so that means that the top is completed. That is the easiest part of this pattern. And now we can move on with the skirt. For the skirt, you will need a few measurements. For starters, you will need your waist circumference. You will also need your hip circumference. You will need the distance between your waist and the widest part of your hips, which is usually somewhere between 22 to 25 centimeters, depending on how tall you are. And then lastly, you will need the length of your skirt. For me, I'm going to go with a length of 50 centimeters plus 5 centimeters of contingency in case I need it. I'm going to continue working along this line that I've created here, and I will continue to consider this my center back and my center front. So for starters, we just make an arbitrary mark somewhere on this line, and we're going to consider this the starting point where our waist seam hits. From our waist seam, we're going to mark down the distance between our waist and the widest part of our hips. As I mentioned, that's somewhere between 22 and 25. For me, it's 23. And then lastly, go ahead and on that same line, measure the total length of your skirt. You can now go ahead and, in a perpendicular angle to the line that we consider our center front and center back, create additional lines. The waistline can be a full line, the hip line can be a guideline, and then the total length of your skirt can be a full line again. Now we are going to start with our waist. So for our waist, we need 1/4 of the circumference of our waist, and that should actually coincide with your waist measurement here in your bodice. Go ahead and mark that on your first line, which is the waistline. Now we need 1/4 of our hip circumference and mark that on our hip line. And that same measurement we are going to apply on the line that marks the end of our skirt. Now we have these 3 markings, and we can go ahead and connect them. The one between the hip and the length of the skirt in a straight manner, and then the one between the waist and the hip we can connect in a curve. Now I always like to raise the side seam by about 1 centimeter to give my waistline a bit more of a natural curvature. And that is the front of our skirt. That's it really. Again, marking the center front. This is also a fold. For the center back, we are basically going to copy exactly what we just did to the other side of that line. We need to consider a dart in the waist. Now the dart in the waist should be the exact same point as the dart in the back of our bodice. So for that, you simply go ahead and make sure you get the measurement that is the distance from your center back to the beginning of your dart, and you mark that from the center back into your skirt. Now you consider the total distance of your dart in the back bodice, and you apply that same distance to your waist. So something that you have to consider is, even when taking away the distance of the dart, you need to end up with 1/4 of your waist circumference for the back skirt. So make sure that the distance between your center back to the beginning of your dart, disregarding the dart, and then from the second marking of the dart to your side seam is 1/4 of your waist circumference. So that's the pattern for most of our dress. The only thing that we still need is the sleeve. So let's do that. I'm gonna grab my first piece of paper. I'm gonna create a straight line. Now for the sleeve, there are a few measurements that we need to take. We need the measurement from the tip of our shoulder, the end of our shoulder where, you know, if you wear a t-shirt, the seam would hit, to your elbow. That's how long the sleeve is going to be. For me, that was 33 centimeters. So on that straight line I just created, I'm going to measure down 33 centimeters. That actually should coincide with where your waist seam hits, and that's kind of a nice line that these dresses usually have, is the end of your sleeve, it hits the same height as the beginning of, or the height of your waist seam. Once we have that, we can square out from that elbow measurement, because that is the end of our seam. Now we have something looking like this. So you square out on a perpendicular angle. What you also need is the distance between the end of your shoulder and the widest part of your upper arm. So for me, that was about 17 centimeters. I'm gonna mark that as well on my first line, and in a perpendicular angle, I'm gonna square out in a guideline, just like that. On that guideline, you need to apply 1/2 of the circumference of the widest part of your sleeve. So for me, my arm circumference is about 31 centimeters. And when I half that, obviously I have 15.5. I'm gonna add a bit of ease to that. So I'm gonna make it 16.5 centimeters and mark that here. And then on your elbow line, you're gonna apply 1/2 of the circumference of your arm in that section and mark it there as well. Now you can connect these 2 points to get the side seam of your sleeve. This line here is eventually going to be a fold. Now we need to create the shoulder curve, and for that you can do that by hand, creating a nice slightly S-shaped curve, something looking like this. Now this is the first step to the sleeve. I'm gonna cut that real quick. Now that we have the first step of the sleeve, we need to make a few incisions to spread the sleeve out to get the width that we need. For that, I'm gonna create a few lines that fan out a little bit like that. And then I'm going to make incisions starting from the shoulder curve down to my elbow. Now we take a piece of paper. We're gonna place the sleeve on a straight edge. Now I know this is pink on pink, so this might be a bit hard to see, but what you do is you spread out the sleeve like this. You want more width in the shoulder curve than in the rest of the sleeve. You spread it out, and once you have something that looks good to you, you can start to trace your sleeve. Now, in addition to spreading out the sleeve like this, what you also want to do is raise the shoulder curve by 3 centimeters. So from the end of your shoulder here, in your first sleeve, you're gonna measure up 3 centimeters. And then from here, you're gonna start to again create an S-curve and start to feed the S-curve into your previous S-curve of the previous sleeve. So there is height here, but then it feeds into the sleeve as it was before. Then you can trace your side seam, and lastly you can trace the end of your sleeve. And this is the sleeve as we need it. Let's look at all of our beautiful pieces. As I mentioned, we have the center back and the center front for the bodice and the skirt, and we have our sleeve pattern. Now, the last few elements for this pattern are the ruffles for the skirt and the sleeve. These are simply straight strips of your fabric that you don't need a pattern for. You can play around with how wide you want them to be depending on how much gather you want. So that's a pretty easy one. And then the last thing, that's just something I want to mention to you, is that in the center back, we're gonna have a zip. So consider that you will need a little bit more seam allowance in the center back than maybe you usually would, and make sure that your seam is at least as long so it hits the widest part of your hips, so you have an easy time of getting in. The grain line for all of the pieces is just a straight one. This isn't cut on the bias or any such a thing, so the grain line for all of these pieces is the same. This is how you place them on your fabric. Perfect. That's our pattern. Now this is a great starting point for the dress. I always recommend making a mock-up and not cutting it straight from your shell fabric, just because we want to make sure we are not wasting anything. And it's possible that you want to make a few adjustments, so doing a mock-up first is always a good idea. All right, so the first go at the pattern has been passed, and that means I just went out quickly to get some calico, which I forgot to buy the other day, which is simply fabric that is super cheap, quite sturdy, and you can use this to create mock-ups, which I am going to do. The pattern pieces are fairly simple, so I don't think there is much risk in cutting it from the shell right away, but I just feel like doing things the right way, so a mock-up it is. Meaning I'm going to unpack this now, and then I'm going to cut all of my pattern pieces from this and sew it all together, and then we can see what the mock-up looks like and make any changes if need be. Alright, so after a few hours, no just kidding, it probably took me 45 minutes or so to assemble this, we have a mock-up! I can already tell that it's quite voluminous. It might be too big for me. Also, I've already noticed that I made a mistake in the front. Here in the front bodice piece, it's just too wide in the waist to match up with the skirt. But I'm really happy, for example, about what the sleeve looks like. It has this vampire's wife characteristic where it has a lot of volume up here that it becomes quite narrow. So I'm gonna try this on now, and then we'll see what we have to change. All right, I'm wearing the mock-up and I am really pleased for this first draft of the pattern. So like I said, I made a mistake here in the front, or I'm not sure if I made a mistake or if I just didn't see that there was a pleat, a crease in the calico when I cut my pattern pieces from it. So there's this like ease that shouldn't be here, so I pinned that away. I will triple check that with the pattern later. Otherwise, the bodice isn't bad at all. I'm considering moving the dart at an even more drastic angle because I feel like those dresses have the dart start almost at the side seam down here, if that makes sense. And then also I'm wondering if there is a way for me to make it so that it really hugs the boobs, if you know what I mean. Like that's what those dresses seem to be doing. I don't know how they do it with just one dart, but I will try to figure that out as well. So basically, like from down here, it would have to be like tight already, like super tight. Let's see if we can make this happen. Super happy with the sleeves. They have this vampire's wife silhouette. So they have gather up here at the shoulder and then the rest is quite narrow. I think I can make them a little bit smaller, just a tad. And then the skirt looks pretty good to me. It's a bit bellish, so it's a bit too wide here. There's a lot of ease on the side, so I'm gonna take that in just a smidge. But other than that, pretty chuffed about this. I think we can go to the next stage. Alright, so this mock-up process was quite successful. I'm now going to go ahead and apply all of the changes that I noted onto my paper pattern, and then I'm going to call it a day. In next week's video, I'm going to continue with this project. I'm going to cut out all of my pieces from my shell and lining, and then I'm going to start the assembly process, and hopefully in the end we will see a final result. So hope I see you next week.